Hi, everyone. Welcome to this virtual event on Open Radio Access Networks from The Logic. Welcome to our loyal subscribers, people who've been with us for a while. Welcome to people who are just discovering us, who are interested in the subject and wanted to find out what we and the all-star panel we have for you have to say about it. I'll introduce The Logic to those of you who aren't already familiar with it. We're an online-only, digital-first newsroom. We have people in the major cities across Canada covering the Canadian economy, where it's going, and innovation in all its forms, from electric vehicles to cryptocurrency, to telecom, like today, to artificial intelligence and quantum, to agriculture. I spent a chunk of last week on a sheep farm for reasons that subscribers will find out the current plan is tomorrow morning. We have a subscriber community that gets exclusive access to events. This one's free. Not all of them are. We have meetups. We have a Logic Council Slack for discussion among people who are interested in these things, and company sentiment analysis, surveys, and job postings. It is a subscriber-supported operation, and we can't do what we do without people who see that our journalism is worth paying for, and we strive very hard to make sure that we live up to that promise. So at the end of this, if you are interested, and I hope you will be, I'll give you the link where you should go. My name is David Reevely. I am in Ottawa, one of three reporters we have here, two of us focused on covering the federal government. One of my areas is telecom regulation, telecom services, and telecom tech, where we're going. And so that's why I am hosting this event on ORAN, Open Radio Access Networks. And the context for it is Canada used to be a major global player in telephony. Nortel was kind of our standard bearer for international high-tech business. And after Nortel collapsed, a lot of those people are still working in telephony and related technologies in Canada, but they are not working under the Canadian banner. They're working at places like Ericsson and Nokia and Huawei. And so what we're going to talk about today is a significant new technological development in the field that some people, including our guests, think has a lot of potential for reestablishing Canada as a player in this sphere. I have a bunch of questions for the panelists, who I'll be introducing shortly, but really this thing is best if it's driven by you. Ways of answering questions before you. You can use the question section, the bottom right-hand side of your screen. They'll get passed to me. I'll weave them in as best I can. So please, if you have things you want to know, bring it on. This event is free because it is sponsored by TELUS, and we are very grateful for their support in this. That's why it is widely accessible. We're going to begin with a few words from our sponsor, who is, in the person of Ibrahim Gedeon, who is TELUS's Chief Technology Officer. He's responsible for innovation, technology development, and technology strategy at TELUS. So I'll turn it over to him now to say a few words.
Thank you, David. And good morning. Thank you for giving me the chance to say a couple of words. And I have to start off by my last job before joining TELUS was running Nortel wireless engineering. So it's pretty germane when we talk about Nortel's demise and the vacuum that's created for the Canadian intellect. Just wanted to talk a bit about ORAN for a second, and I'll try to phrase it in one of my favorite expressions. And if it doesn't resonate with everybody else, we can go into details. But in 2 minutes, you're buying a car. Like, speaking as an operator, people are buying their next gen car, and the 2024 model is available. And when you think of wireless networks, it's ORAN. So we see that car being driven by a lot of our peers. Technology's matured. It started in 2014 for a lot of folks who don't think it's some new fad. And our stance as TELUS is it is a chance for Canada to insert itself through multiple layers, one on the innovation, to create technology pieces, but more importantly, I think what's critical for that is getting a market that is ripe for ORAN. And that's one of TELUS's commitment, working with a lot of our partners, and we've invited some of them here, such as Intel and Rakuten and others. But fundamentally, we see next year's model And speaking as just from a pure humanistic point of view, I have no desire to buy the 2020 model when I see the 2024 on the street running. So we're working very hard with a lot of our partners, and many thanks, David, to the panel like this that would enlighten and share, hopefully infect a lot of our colleagues on the momentum and the coolness of what can be done. But this is truly a disruption where we as a nation can play. Speaking as a purely Canadian engineer here, and as the TELUS CTO, I really don't want to go through multiple steps when I see the future tomorrow is here today. So hope you guys enjoy the panel. I'm told I'm only invited to say a couple of words, so thank you for your time and attention, and please enjoy. You got some great global colleagues of mine on the panel. They'll give you the lay of the land and what's happening. So good luck, have fun, David, and chat later.
Thank you so much. Without further ado, let us bring in the hotshot panel that we have assembled for you. First of all, Tareq Amin, who is the CEO at Rakuten Mobile and Rakuten Symphony, both subsidiaries of Japan's massive conglomerate Rakuten. Tareq launched Rakuten Symphony in 2021 with a vision to reimagine telecom for the hyperscale era. It's the world's first modern industrial scale automation platform, Rakuten Symphony, built specifically for telecom. And it's already disrupting the status quo in the telecom industry. Also, we have Caroline Chan, who is the Vice President for the Network and Edge Solutions Group at Intel. She is responsible for Intel's global network infrastructure strategy and solution development related to 5G wireless tech, especially around private networks, new use cases, and Internet of Things verticals that are enabled by all the affiliated technologies. And we have Young Kim, who has worn many, many hats in the telecom industry, from British Telecom to Korea Telecom, where he was the president, chief executive officer, before that, chief strategy officer. He's been a telecom executive in the US, Korea, Japan, and the UK, as I said, and has spearheaded many transformational and strategic business remodelings and acquisitions. So we have technical experts, we have business experts, and we're going to get to them. Hello, panel. Thank you for being here with us.
Hello.
Hi there.
So let me begin by asking the dummy question, which is, what is ORAN? And I'm going to put this question to Tareq Amin so that everyone who's involved has the same basic understanding of what we're talking about. Define this thing for us.
Yeah. Hi, David, and good morning, everyone. Maybe first just thank TELUS and Ibrahim for sponsoring this event. I think it's really, an event that I was looking forward to it, because as your opening statement talks about Canada and the opportunity in Canada, I was, by the way, a consumer of Nortel products when I was working in the United States. So hopefully what we talk today could ignite another revolution in Canada that I'm extremely optimistic about, really across the world. So, to understand what is happening in the industry, and especially when we talk about ORAN, maybe if you allow me, I want to just take a brief moment just to explain the history of, what I personally have done in both a region I worked in India and then in Rakuten, because that's really, really a intersection point for us to understand the ORAN architecture and its advantages to the overall mobile operator segment and the industry as a whole. When I worked in the U.S., I built 13 cities in the U.S. And as I mentioned, I was a consumer of Nortel products. And one of the things I want to tell you that since 1981, if you really examine how telco networks are deployed in one of the most critical segments, which is radio access, I call it's been always a game of swapping hardware. You bring new hardware in and swap old hardware out. So here we are in 2023, and you would think a lot has changed, but the reality, what has changed is, yes, we have changed the acronyms of the Gs, but the fundamental way of how we deploy product and the most expensive things in telco still remains the same. We still swap cabinets, we still swap basebands, we still swap cards, and the essence of software just absolutely does not exist. So, moving away from the US to India was probably, for me personally, one of the most interesting things that ever happened to me in my career. And I really thought I knew everything in telecom until I moved to India. And when you move to a country that its average revenue per user is $1, and 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 its average revenue per user is $ it changes your perspective. It changes your perspective about supply chain, economics, how you engage with vendors. And what came to my mind, this is almost 9 years ago, by the way, what came to my mind is the analogy of what hyperscalers have went to as they went into this journey of commoditization, as they looked at commodity hardware, running onto mostly was Intel CPUs into data centers. And I was really intrigued by this idea of hardware, software disaggregation. Before it's even, we talk about the elegance of Open RAN, open interfaces. Maybe the first thing I would tell you, my definition is, number one, it is all about hardware, software disaggregation. The ability for you as a mobile operator to know the cost of hardware without inflations of margins, this has never happened in radio, never. So that was a key pillar to drive costs and economics down. I mean, if you knew the exact cost of the hardware, you have a capability to control your TCO. The second thing
So
is,
if I may, we're talking about essentially switching from buying a MacBook, a factory sealed thing that you are not supposed to service, except you buy it from a great big provider, comes in on trucks and you load it into your centers, to a more build your own PC type of model for a telecom network. Is that fair?
Correct. Exactly. And look, I mean, the idea that I thought this is compelling, as we engage as an industry, the concept of commoditization, I mean, let's take a critical component. Let's take a CPU, for example. Well, you need some compute to run your workloads, right? I mean, the cloud providers have been doing this for decades, and they have enjoyed the benefits of what cloud could bring to their business. The first question that came to my mind as I moved from India and I applied this hardware software disaggregation for one primary reason, is to reduce cost, to be able to afford the rate plans that we've launched in India and with Reliance Jio. Now move to Japan, and David, I mean, we had options in Japan. We had an option to deploy, as Ibrahim said. The option in front of me was deploy a legacy infrastructure, and I just could not fathom just going through another journey of deploying proprietary hardware and deploying a network that has no essence to automation and software. And then I started really looking at Open RAN. I mean, frankly speaking, it was just a marketing idea at the time. 5 years ago, it was still in early days, but I loved the concept. I said, look, if hyperscalers have done this idea, by the way, they are running real-time communications today and have been running it for a while. And why we could not do this in telco, and I pushed really, really hard to create the ecosystem. I created a consortium of willing companies that are putting their entire destiny on our ability to succeed in this venture. And so we've opened up the entire interfaces for radio access. We commoditize the hardware. We no longer use proprietary baseband, and the software of radio and the heart and the brain of the software, which is the physical layer, this L1, is nothing now but a software application that runs on a cloud environment. And oh my goodness, how amazing this idea was. So, I mean, this is really the essence of what I think Open RAN is all about: hardware, software disaggregation, open interfaces, and third, complete, utter flexibility and control in the lifecycle management, software, and automation of the radio. And that is what I think really, maybe simplifying all the technical jargon about what Open RAN, it is really, for me, about these three pillars of why, what is Open RAN, and primarily what is the reason that we took the choice decisively to pursue this technology and mature it in Japan.
So if you're a telco, it makes it much easier to snap out one piece and snap in a single replacement rather than buying
tell you, David, how about this idea? How about we don't have generations anymore? How about that idea? How about we stop chasing generations and billions of dollars of CapEx investment, and we build a generation-free network? Okay, that's disruptive. And the way you do it is by focusing your energy, your effort on software. So no more swaps. The software sits, to me, like if you look in Japan case, all of our compute is sitting on edge data centers. We have a cloud environment that hosts all of them. And on top of the cloud is an application, one application of radio that is running the Open RAN radio. And then in the future, whether it is 4G, 5G, 6G, the process of transition, now it is no difference than what you would see in a hyperscaler environment with their own application. So I've been really big advocate and a proponent of this idea that let us drop the Gs, regardless of what they call. Let us drop them, and we build a generation-free network enabled by Open RAN, enabled by by cloud architecture, and AI in the essence of what drives these networks. So
let's get Caroline Chan in here talking about some of the things that Open RAN enables. What are some of the uses that you can put a more open architecture to that is tougher if you're buying your whole kit from Ericsson or Huawei?
There are many things, and like just go back to what Tareq talked about, right? What Intel has done is we are clearly being a major player in the cloud, in the data center side. And everything that Open RAN strive to do is what the hyperscalers are doing today. You have this hardware running, but most of the software, most of the monetization, most of the benefits really coming from the software, the application software. RAN is one of the application software, but there are many others. You think about the AIs, and I think one of your audience is asking, can this be done in a public safety area? In fact, one of the Open RAN application right now we're working on here at Intel is for the U.S. defense industry. Think about the high reliability, the type of application they need to run, the security level that we need in the defense industries. It's bar none. It's the extreme side of it. By having that open interface, you invite many software developers, applications to come in. That's what the innovation that started driving. So the telco, which traditionally tend to be a lot more conservative, probably even moving a little slower, and now finally in par with the hyperscalers, they maybe enterprise ITs that wanted to run this. That's one of the reasons why we started really focusing on taking Open RAN into 5G, into the private network, because we see it's very well intercepted with the enterprise needs, the security, the transparency, the efficiency that is right, and the ability to extract the telemetries from the network upwards to the application developers. I think that's where a lot of innovation we can derive from.
So, extract the telemetry. Elaborate on that. What exactly does that mean?
A lot of the things that happen in the layer one, energy, what's the workload that you're running. You don't have to run full server at a full-blown energy level. You can lower some of the energy. In fact, Tareq at Rakuten has done tremendous amount of work using AI to predict when you need to run your server, your radio network at a full force, or you can downgrade some of this, because Intel server does have many different power states, allow you to drive significant savings in that. And Open RAN has this RIC, which allows a lot of smarts to build in, and based on the network performance and what happened instantaneous at that moment. In fact, Tareq, I think you have done some pretty good examples on that too.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Caroline. I mean, back to the earlier point I mentioned, probably one of the biggest aha moments for us when we launched the network in Japan is the implication of this telemetry. By the way, the telemetry is the extraction of real-time data, and the ability to do, when I say real-time, it is truly real-time. It doesn't go through another intermediate box called EMS or anything like that. I mean, that gives you unprecedented ability to control and diagnose, and also bring a partnership system, smaller companies that could innovate on top of what you have deployed.
Mm-hmm.
So it is really a game changer. It is, I mean, I can't tell you, seeing is believing. And that's why I would love everybody to come to Tokyo, see how well efficiently this network is running today, just because of the architecture and the automation that comes on top of it.
So, Young Kim, your experience at Korea Telecom, sort of pre what is officially ORAN, but you rolled out ORAN-like technology at Korea Telecom. First of all, just briefly, what drove that decision? Why did you do that instead of taking the traditional approach?
Yeah, I think it's 2011 when I was Chief Strategy Officer. I think we came to a point that there's a lots of bespoke network around, and we're going into 4G. And the decision is to bring Ericsson into competition, because before then it was LG Nortel and Samsung was dividing, and they're making lots of money. So we brought Ericsson basically to be a third horse to run, but for them, we forced for them to separate, as Tareq said, software running on a generic Intel computer, and the hardware, which is separated from the radio head. Obviously, Ericsson didn't like that very much, but to come to Korean market, they had to do it. So next one I forced was Nortel, because moving to the first one was a 3G. Now 4G, Ericsson doesn't want to do it. So I brought Nortel to push it. Basically, the whole industry doesn't want to segregate hardware from software, because they think they're losing the hold onto upgrade, because there is more better processor and we need to develop lots of new things. You have to swap out completely. Okay, so we want to be away and not to be a prisoner of that. So I think ORAN is basically, as Tareq said, is separation. But the way I see it is a cloud. Okay. Initially, if you are deploying on a greenfield, like Amazon and Google use their cloud for internal, more greenfield way. When it became sort of a service available, then you have to have lots of tools to integrate what's in outside. So now the whole industry of Amazon, Google, and Azure is how to integrate heterogeneous different systems. I think ORAN has to go in that field, because if you are like British Telecom, Korea Telecom, Docomo, you have stacks of hardware protocols. You can't just I say I'm moving to ORAN. This is where the Canada may have opportunity, is bringing in all those changes of hardware that has been built over 20 years, moving into a new environment, which is ORAN based, and also software driven, different applications running, as Caroline said, you open it up to other people to develop, different applications. I think Canada can, make that happen. And if you succeed in making lots of smaller companies working together, recreate Nortel 2.0, it's not, I don't think it's going to be a single entity and it becomes I'm Nortel 2.0. I think Nortel 2.0 will be few hundred companies and created, which are really helped by government. What kind of benefits the government will give it to operators to go for ORAN, especially open one, that other people can develop applications.
So sticking with you, go on.
No. So other things like spectrums, you can give a preferential treatment if you are going to deploy ORAN, open ORAN. I mean, open ORAN, I meant is really other people can develop applications on top of it. And that's where the real thing is going to happen.
So, Tareq, Japan, you were doing a greenfield deployment in an extremely dense, consumer-rich environment. Korea, broadly similar. Canada, geographically vast, sparsely populated. We have a lot of cell phones, but we have a lot of more primitive service and famously very expensive. How well does the experience of ORAN in dense markets in Asia translate to a place like Canada?
Yeah, I mean, I think David, if you track back, probably like 4 years ago in Japan, I mean, I was reading articles almost every day discussing why ORAN would not succeed, or a radio access that's completely disaggregated will not work in urban areas. So we started this journey while we are greenfield in Japan. The utter reality is it was a choice for Rakuten Mobile to launch ORAN in Japan because we knew exactly if we execute and we bring the right collaborative ecosystem together, we could achieve our efficiency and productivity numbers that we had in mind to allow us to compete and allow us to reduce dramatically the cost structure for running connectivity in Japan. So one of the key things, by the way, we've examined is while we build ORAN, I wanted to change the entire way of how sites are built. If you go and look at the sites in Japan, one of the quick observations one might have is to ask, well, where is the electronics? Just think about this. If there is no electronics at the site, it changes the paradigm from having this complex, maybe organization that manages the maintenance of cell sites, the routine work that needs to happen, to all of a sudden, you don't have to do that. You focus on other high value items on running a network. So our sites are built nothing but I consider it to be a super simplistic factory. It is really, really easy sites. While Tokyo is very dense, if I look in rural areas, I think actually the advantages might even be bigger. What happens if the sites don't need maintenance? What happens if you really take everything out from physically being installed at sites and bringing everything to the edge? I would argue that you could deploy a much larger network at a lower cost with lower maintenance, lower operations. So this issue about greenfield versus brownfield, I'm really also very fixated about. I don't think this is as big of an issue as people would think it is. But I also don't think that ORAN is only applicable only in a single morphology versus the others. This is a great technology, maybe slightly misunderstood. I actually believe wholeheartedly this is the future. This is no way and no doubt in my mind, this is where everybody is heading. And regardless if you are sparse, large geography country, or highly dense country, to me, it really doesn't matter. It is just the architecture evolution to move away from proprietary hardware into cloud, into software, and automation and how you run and manage the network. It should, at the end of the day, self-heal itself, self-organize itself, do all the things it needs to run to drive autonomy, lower cost, and enable maybe a faster deployment in rural areas that the costs are prohibitive today.
So Caroline, what's your take on that? How big a market are we talking about globally?
If I look, so I'm looking at what Del Oro just reported. The RAN market, give or take, about $40 billion, according to the analysts. So this year, Del Oro said 2023, Open RAN is about 8% of total market, and they predict that this will go to 18% by 2027. So it has it's a good sized market, and it has a high CAGR. And more importantly, like Mr. Young Kim was saying, is that it opens up the ecosystem to much wider people that come in. Companies is not one or two, it's many more. And also one thing I really want to stress, why Canada? I'm a Nortel alum, in case you haven't noticed that. Canada has a huge talent pool of radio design. Nortel used to do this in Calgary, in Ottawa, in Montreal. We have great engineering schools in Kingston and Western Ontario, Queens. There is a talent pool with a telco expertise that with the right investment and by the government and need to be concerted public and private sector investment. Canadians are a ripe talent pool and the innovation drive to be a significant part of the value chain. I'm sitting here in Bay Area. I can tell you, I run into a lot of people are Canadians, former Nortel and others, and here working in the Silicon Valley. They could have been working in Toronto, in Ottawa, in Calgary. So,
but given that they are working in the Bay Area and in the US and in Dallas and so on, why would Canada be a place where such an ecosystem, whether it's one big company or a collection of smaller companies, why would Canada as a geography be a place where this would happen now, given what has happened since Nortel collapsed?
I think there is a motivation, like Ibrahim was talking about, with innovators like TELUS willing to take that plunge into the market. It provides that the demand, and the fact that Canada have had this rich history. It's not just Nortel. You have BlackBerry, all of that coming together. That there's a new crop of engineers that should be steered, and especially think about the fact that Open RAN does open up a lot of software talent. It's not just a radio design.
And
It's
Caroline,
not just a radio
think
design.
about, by the way, in Canada, think about, I mean, it's very well known. One of the best AI graduates that we see is coming out of Canada. So, I mean, this is another big thing, that this technology is not just only really understanding the core fundamental physical layer, L1, L2, but there is another layer on top of it that is critical in the AI. So I am really, really excited about what is the possibility to create a massive ecosystem. Of course, I completely agree, by the way. It's not like another giant conglomerate as Nortel, but maybe a consortium of many, many companies that is even a healthier ecosystem.
Yeah, Nortel 2.0, like Mr. Kim was saying, could be multiple Nortel that come together. The aspects of what AI can do, not just the network AI, but the AI that can derive from this fundamental 5G connectivity for our mines, our ports, our logistics industry, transportation, industrial, Bombardier's manufacturing plant, anybody? That kind of information that can provide, and in combination with our manufacturing industry in Canada, our mining industry, there is a close correlation, and you will spur software the industry like you never seen before. Therefore, our graduates could probably stay back in Canada, not having to come down to the Silicon Valley or Dallas. Not that it's a bad place. I live in Dallas now.
Yeah.
Young,
Yeah.
are there? I'm going to take up a question from the audience. From
I wasn't reading it,
but it has to, the question I want to put to you is whether there are implications for how spectrum is distributed if companies switch to ORAN architecture. This is a constant source of dispute in Canada, is how we auction it off and make companies, telcos, pay enormous amounts of money for it, and whether it's chopped up properly and so on. Does ORAN have any consequences for what spectrum telcos need, or how it should be distributed?
I think it's actually having ORAN. You make your spectrum allocation or strategy much more dynamic. You can even have a time-limited ones. You don't have to own it all the time. You can borrow from someone else to use it. But I think coming back to your original question, is Canada right with the rural areas and dense? You have both. You have dense as well as rural. Now, this is, lots of people think ORAN is for a big, chunky, processing, but it isn't. It's like today you go to Amazon, you can still have a very small requirements and capacity, as well as huge conglomerate can run on it. So some people questions about can we do a low bit rate? Yes, it can be accommodated. And it can use different spectrums. I think the whole thing is how to integrate that. As someone come on and said, look, on ORAN as an application, I can run LoRa network, which is a very low bit, okay, but a low spectrum or low frequency. So the variety of it and the way the ecosystem is not hardware bound, that you have to buy certain things to run application. This is where smartphone came and got rid of all of the gadgets that you needed to run, like a compass and calculators and all sorts of things. This became an application. And ORAN, as far as networking and communication, security over it, it all can be an application. And it can be owned and run by different companies.
So,
how to build the ecosystem and have to by government is most important.
And that I want to talk about that in one sec, because that's obviously a really big deal. To bring it, though, I'm going to put this question and look for like lightning round answers from each of you, starting with Tareq. From the consumer's perspective, I'm just a guy who walks around with a cell phone in my pocket. What difference do I notice if I'm using an ORAN-based wireless network versus a more traditional one? Is there any?
Just quickly to highlight, two things. In the case of Japan, obviously, Japan, because of utter simplification on the cost structure that we've done, we've been able to pass savings to consumers in Japan, in terms of what they effectively pay per month for complete unlimited data. But the second and more important thing, by the way, a lot of people don't realize this. If you want to put a single software release on a network today with a legacy architecture, it is a process that lasts anywhere from 6 to 12 months before a major software release is introduced in the network. And if you compare that analogy, let's take Netflix and others that do this almost hundreds, if not thousands of software releases per day. Imagine the service innovation that we could deliver with proper open architecture, and what it means to the consumer is access to a much wider variety of services at a much quicker time, and don't have to wait a year for the network to evolve and advance. So these are really the two quick things I would tell you that the consumer would absolutely see and observe as a result of ORAN deployment.
Caroline Chan, what difference would this make to the consumer?
Everything what Tareq said, much faster innovation, much faster. If there's any security patch will come in, that's what cloud native really meant. It's a cloud native running like your Amazon cloud web service, much easier rollout, and ideally a better service.
So faster and cheaper. Young Kim, any other ways that the consumer would notice this?
I think consumer will notice if the competitiveness will bring the price down if it is properly passed on to. I think this is where the government has to have a very open, competitive strategy to bring the winners can bring down the consumer price.
So it sounds like there are two elements where of this possible transition where government plays a role. One is either encouraging or forcing or helping telcos to adopt ORAN, and then making sure that the benefits are for the technology creation benefits are in a particular place, ideally from a Canadian's perspective in Canada. So let's talk about the first thing first. And I'll start with Young Kim and then go to Tareq. What role is there for governments in getting telcos to adopt this technology, if there is any? Because it sounds like it makes the case pretty well on its own.
Yeah, I worked in telco nearly over 30 years, and then the networking company. Telcos by nature is a licensed business, and they are ultra conservative. Okay, if you leave them alone, naturally they want to buy all the IBM mainframe instead of going for the distributed computing and cloud and all that. I think you have to give encouragement to change and innovate. And that's where the government comes with help, preferential treatment. This is an open race, okay? If you leave it to giant telcos, they will not do it. I envy Tareq because he got a whole new different remit to start up Rakuten Mobile. But if you go to all the established telcos, there will be 1,001 reasons why they don't want to take a risk. And the only way you can pull them out of that pothole is by giving them incentives. Who is better? Because as I said, telcos are licensed business. If you encourage them to come out of that pothole, that government can have a lot of different weapons to do that. Okay, and that's what they have to use it to foster open innovation based on ORAN.
Tareq Amin, what's your take?
So I think so well said, by the way, very, very well said. I think, from our point of view, Rakuten Symphony is a private enterprise. So, we built the company, or, I went through a build of this company, self-funded it, and really making a very big brand and across the world. However, I also have seen, the challenges that we face as a company. And because we have a practical experience on being today, the world's largest open RAN software provider is Rakuten Symphony, with over 400,000 radiating elements now deployed worldwide. I know in practicality what is the challenges to mature this technology and advance its adoption. I also know very well, if you ask me, what do we need from government participation? And maybe I'll classify it to you into three big areas. And why it actually makes, I'll announce to you that, we have decided to open up an R&D center officially on Toronto, and the office already, we are now in the process of moving to a new facility in Toronto. And the objective of this office, it is no longer about what I call support organization to support, let's say, TELUS and others in Canada that we want to engage and work with. But I do believe that the incentives that we have been given, where every R&D resource I hire, I'm getting certain credits and discounts from Canadian government, I think is brilliant. It really makes the cost very competitive for us to go into Canada. So my objective now is to have our official second Open RAN software development organization to be based in Canada. In that context, we will support L1, L2, and L3 layer development in country. We will build the reference architecture for hardware. We're not a hardware company, but we have amazing idea for reference design we want. So that part, which is I consider incentives that are really paid against R&D that are disruptive in its nature, i.e. in this case, ORAN. Second, this industry is really, really challenged with one aspect. It is challenged by securing a trusted supply for hardware manufacturing. Now, to be truthful with you, this is the biggest problem in ORAN. We in Japan was an ecosystem of one. I brought a consortium of 11 companies, but believe me, it was tiring. It was tiring to go fly everywhere, convince people that you should go and invest and do this. And what I always was challenged is when you look at manufacturing facilities, mostly they were really focused on Asia Pacific region, some mostly in China, maybe Taiwan, and I could not see an opportunity to materialize a source that could create hardware until maybe possibly now we have a great opportunity in Canada. And I think that's where I want to give really credit where credit is deserved. That's why TELUS is critical, very critical to the maturity of this ecosystem. And a brownfield operator that is willing to take the risk and the journey, as Ibrahim said, he's looking for a 2024 model. Why would you ever want to buy a car? I wouldn't even say 2020. I would say this car was built in 1981. Why would you want to go to a 1981 car if 2024 is ready here and today and now? And then hopefully what we will see through partnership with TELUS and others, we will have a trusted manufacturer to come in Canada to build hardware for the world. So that's another subsidies. Rather than talking about ORAN and encouraging it, give subsidies to start this private industry. And it's initial. You don't need to subsidize them forever, just to ignite them, to create a hardware at a cost competitive advantage. Of course, it could serve Canada, but it could serve the rest of the world, because the rest of the world is hungry to find a trusted manufacturer for Open RAN ecosystem. And then last but not least, to create subsidies for IoTs. Now, this Open RAN industry is very, very great, but it also requires in the early days to do the software IoT between software of company A, hardware in case of remote Radiohead, massive MIMO, and other products with company B. Once you get this initial IoT done, the rest is piece of cake, but it needs to happen. So, and that's why I think these three areas, this is why I see a huge opportunity of private-public participation. Rather than talking and just promoting Open RAN, put real subsidies, real money, and intensify and incentivize private companies to take advantage of really doing it. And then last but not least, of course, there are, mobile telcos need to adopt, obviously, this technology. And there's other things that I think government could do to help accelerate the adoption of Open RAN in mobile service operators.
So I'm going to give Caroline Chan a chance on this as well, but I let you go, Tareq, because you just kept making news as you were talking about opening a facility in Canada. Can you briefly tell us a little bit more about how many people you intend to employ and exactly what it's going to do and by when? Did we just have a dropout? All right, well, I will come back to that. But Caroline, moving on to the question of how we build the ecosystem that we might label Nortel 2.0 for the design and the manufacture and production. What role do you see for governments in that, given that this is a very government-oriented, government-regulated industry?
I'll just use it. Actually, it's happening right now in the U.S., which we may or may not use as a mirror. So the U.S. government has created a $1.5 billion fund called Wireless Innovation Fund as part of the CHIP Act. 2 tranches. The first tranche is currently in a notice of funding, NOFO. It's doing exactly what Tareq just described. It's to fund the interoperability testing, the certification, putting the software and the hardware components, because it's open ecosystem, Open RAN. That means you do have to do testing with each other. So that's $125 million that's been issued. So different companies that would have this will obviously be done in the United States, apply for that. Then the second tranche will be going for products. So that's where when we talk about Nortel 2.0, the pool of Nortel 2.0 wannabe companies, private company can apply for that fund. And as long as you can submit to say this is to be part of the Open RAN ecosystem, and you have a shot at getting that fund, I think that is a model that we see being helpful to grow a ecosystem, the innovative ecosystem in Canada with the government help. And it's not going, forever help like Tareq described. It's really get things started, especially if you are a small or medium-sized company, to be wanting to jump into this new vertical. And this is the one path that the U.S. government had done, and I'm hope by sharing this is looking at Canadian government could also provide something in line of that.
Canada and the U.S. do seem to be in subsidy wars, trying to attract next generation technologies. How quickly can we write checks and how big can they be? We've seen it a lot with electric vehicles and those technologies, but maybe in telecom as well. I guess the question though, which I'll put to you, Young, is that a danger that you end up throwing money at companies?
Yeah, I think currently the way the government is subsidizing, I think there is a danger. The reason for that is until this ORAN is adopted and operational, and then is available to others to innovate on top of it. Giving subsidies to the other companies when the things are not ready is ridiculous. It's almost like trying to run App Store before the Apple had the smartphone, okay? And you have to get open system. And think of this, smartphone eco world apps created millions of jobs and whole complete new industry. Think of cloud, Amazon, Azure, Google created a huge industry. Initially, people feared by having cloud computing means get rid of jobs, but it actually created more jobs, okay? Now, what is not open is these bloody telecom networks are not open. You got to make it open before you can innovate. So it's no point subsidizing application developers and all that when the system is not open. Make it bloody thing open and subsidized. Okay, that's why the current subsidy is just going in nowhere, because when you don't have a cloud, when you don't have an app store, what is the point developing applications?
So I've been out to funding announcements that had Prime Minister Trudeau at them in West Ottawa, hundreds of millions of dollars for Nokia, hundreds of millions of dollars for Ericsson. Everyone's very excited about the jobs that they're bringing or keeping there. And I see you shaking your head. You think this is bad spending?
Yeah, because force network operators opens the network and then give money for people or enterprise to innovate. The creating jobs at the moment, the way they do it is a small jobs. Its numbers are small. You're not creating ecosystem. Until you create the ecosystem, all of this money spent, it's very, very small. That's the way I believe it anyway. I believe, as Tareq said and Caroline said, until the open system is there to innovate, what is the point? What is the point?
Tareq, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm smiling because I think this is 100% accurate. I mean, I really would tell you that the issue I see, if I want to be just a little bit candid here, we get into this area where people get very, very comfortable of the past. The problem is the past, in my opinion, will lead to nothing other than more opportunities for mobile operators to innovate and advance themselves from just being a connectivity provider. They will wait and see. And the argument about Open RAN, well, it's not ready, the feature sets are not completed. But I would tell you, I mean, if it was me, I would jump all over this idea. I will jump all over it. I will innovate. And when we think about funding that would go to legacy vendors, I don't know how that could achieve objectives. See, the best I have seen in my own eyes work really, really well. When startups are rewarded and when startups are paid, oh my goodness, they are innovative. And when you talk about jobs, I actually would tell you factually, a larger ecosystem of many, many companies is far better than one just large entity to be created. And so I would rather have this fund go to many different companies and a startup and a pool of them that would come in. The one part I will tell you, I mean, in Rakuten Mobile example, take this case. We have almost no large vendors. And the large vendor that we have, he's only selling us hardware, right? There's no software as such. And when we talk about a system that is open, I took a company in San Diego, 11 people company. Just think about it, 11 people company. How many telcos in the world would allow an 11 people company to come in to put their software on top of this radio environment? Now, I had to tell you, this company built one of the best SON platforms I have ever seen in life. They are highly innovative. And today, the entire Rakuten Mobile is being run by a startup and SON environment by just virtually opening my network APIs to them. And they innovated. And I paid them, by the way, because I needed them to thrive, succeed, have a chance to flourish, if you will. And yeah, so I really think that, continue to fund legacy does not equal that you have done a good job. Because if I'm in their shoes, I'll tell you what I would do. I will fight this idea of open, to the last days, because it has to change the business model. And I'm not ready to change, if I'm a legacy vendor, to change my business model. How do you go from a company that only sells hardware to now a new world that is open and is software centric? So I think that's why I'm excited to see what could potentially happen in Canada and the opportunity that we could do in Canada with innovative companies like TELUS. I really think there is a massive opportunity, if done right, to open up a large ecosystem, a massive job creation for telco. And why would not Canada be interested in being a world leader in this most innovative technology to disrupt the most important thing on and building a telecommunication network, this radio access, and disrupt it in a big way, lower its cost structure.
So, Caroline, we're down to our last couple of minutes, but I want to get you to address one of the questions that's come up from the audience about what mode these potential subsidies or government supports might take. Is there a difficult problem in telephony, in wireless, that you think governments could say, hey, do this, whether it's rural access or deploying these technologies via satellite, or I don't know what, but a particular thing that ORAN could be useful for, but will require support to get there, that maybe governments could push?
Yeah, I'm not expert on this. I can only share what I've seen that lately has been happening in the U.S. Rural broadband was one that they put a significant amount of money where people don't really, before there was no incentive for the telco to provide that, and government came in and stepped in, and we're seeing significant amount of people pulling fibers and deploying wireless that benefited not just the rural people's lives. It actually created this cottage industry, 5G industry called precision agriculture, believe it or not. It's now one of the hyperscalers are estimated to be in 300 million-ish market for them alone. And the benefit is all the rural telcos that come in and roll out wireless network precisely to A, connect the growers, but B, also to help improve the yields. There's actually a number that the government used. That's one example where people will be reluctant to spend because there's not enough people in the farms to connect to get the SIM cards, but there's enough data in the soil and the seeds and how much water you put in, fertilizer you put in to get you a better yield. There's actually a formula that I forgot. It's like every dollar and gets you how much better yields. And that, with the government came in from the federal and state level, kickstarted that precision agriculture. Now it's a program in its entirety.
It's an industry, a full industry.
It's industry. The education is another one. We've seen like some of them don't need it. Oil and gas, they're flooded with money. They are deploying on their own. Manufacturing tend to deploy on their own, but there are areas like logistics, supply chain, will need some incentive to come in. But back to what Dr. Kim said, that you do need to have the underlying infrastructure in place. The government funding came in. Just a fun fact that I happen to know the sound company that Tareq mentioned, the 11 people coming in San Diego, the founder CEO was my colleague from Nortel, from Ottawa. Back to my example, I'm telling you.
There's a lot of lineage there.
I happened to be there, and now in San Diego. So, fun fact.
So the final thing that I want to do is come back to you, Tareq, with follow-up questions about the Toronto operation. When do you expect to be up and running? How many people are you going to be hiring? Tell us a little more about the details.
So we started, by the way, the formality, which is, we got clearance from our board for the investment that we need to do. So that process all approved now. We expect our legal entity officially to be open within the next 30 to 45 days. So we actually started the hiring already. So Rakuten owns, by the way, because it's a large conglomerate, it owns one of the most innovative ebook reader company called Kobo. Kobo is in Canada. And so we are using today our colleagues on Kobo to help us onboard our employees under their umbrella. But my expectation within 30 to 40 people, within 30 to 40 days, we will start formality of the process of having Rakuten Symphony Canada now officially created as a legal entity. And the recruitment process now for physical layer developers, hopefully anybody listening to this, if you are of the right background, I'm always reachable on social channels, on LinkedIn, reach out to me. So our size of our operations there, I mean, right now, most of our R&D is in Bangalore for our software development. Due to the fact that we see healthy amount of investment, we would like to bring 30% of R&D back to North America. And I think it makes quite a bit of sense for us financially, and also as well as talent pool, to focus on Canada to attract the right talent and resources, both seasoned as well as fresh grads that we're going to hire. So in terms of investment amount, I will have to get back to you the exact dollar amount, but I will tell you we will ramp up pretty substantially our staff in Canada to serve not just North America but global customers as well.
Well, that I think is an excellent note to end this part of the discussion on. So I will wrap it up. Thank you to each of you, Young Kim, Tareq Amin, Caroline Chan. It has been an excellent conversation. I'm very grateful that you were all a part of it. Thank you. I thank TELUS and Ibrahim Gedeon, who sponsored this and made it possible for so many people to participate and setting the stage for us. Thank you to the audience, all of you, for joining us. You're why we do it, and the subscribers among you who make our journalism possible. The subscriber support really means everything to us. It lets us do what we do. And if you aren't already a subscriber, you can find a link to subscribe in the chat or go to the Logic's website, thelogic.co, no M on the end. This event put together with the heroic efforts of the Logic's business team, particularly our superstar Ariel Lepper-Walker, Max Zibe, John Packman, the director behind the scenes. We have upcoming events as well to tell you about. An exciting roster, both virtual and in person, subscriber exclusive stuff. Particularly on Monday, June 26th, we're hosting our first ever summit in Toronto. We'll be bringing together thought leaders and decision makers for a day of candid discussions about companies, policies, and people driving transformational change. They are bringing the Logic people from all across the country in to take part in it. So we will all be there. And those of you who are heading to Collision, which starts right afterwards, make sure to join us a day early for the Logic Summit. You find details on the website there as well. If you're a subscriber, thank you again. You can sign up on our website. You can get our newsletter where we will keep you apprised of events like this one, events like the Pre-Collision Summit. And you can also find us on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and on Instagram. Wherever you get your news, that's pretty much where we are too. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a great rest of your days.